There are people who move through life with a peculiar difficulty. They walk into a room and feel everything. They sense the tension that nobody admits, the sorrow behind a practiced smile, the anxiety hidden beneath polite conversation. Most people see what is obvious, but a few see the currents beneath the surface. And while the world praises intelligence and applauds sensitivity and theory, it quietly punishes those who see too clearly. Socrates understood this better than anyone. He knew that the moment you perceive truth beyond the comfort of the crowd, you will no longer belong fully to it. To see clearly is to stand apart. Most people do not want to confront the truth of their own motives, their contradictions, or their illusions. They cling to their stories like blankets. But if you see past these stories, if you see the structures holding them up, you suddenly become a threat. Without doing anything at all, simply existing with clarity exposes what others try to hide. And so the highly perceptive person finds themselves carrying not only their own thoughts, but the unspoken thoughts of everyone around them. It is exhausting, overwhelming, and often deeply lonely. Yet the first thing you must understand is this: there is nothing wrong with you. You are not too sensitive. You are not dramatic or strange or fragile. You are simply awake in a world that prefers sleep. Socrates advised his students to know themselves, but he also warned them of the cost. Because self-knowledge expands perception, and perception expands responsibility. If you see too much, it is not a flaw. It is an ability, one that requires careful handling. The first danger of high perception is the silent isolation it creates. When you see the emotional landscape beneath people's words, you're no longer living in the same world they describe. They say they're fine, but you feel the heaviness in their voice. They say they're confident, but their posture collapses inward. They say a situation is harmless, but you see the social cracks forming before anyone else notices. This sensitivity forms an invisible barrier between you and others. Not because you don't want connection, but because the reality you experience is different from the one they acknowledge. Socrates lived in this divide. He questioned people because he could see where their beliefs contradicted their actions. He wasn't trying to humiliate them. He simply could not pretend the contradiction wasn't there. But most people resented him for it, because he forced them to confront truths they were not prepared to face. In the same way, the highly perceptive person walks through life picking up truths that others drop on the ground, either unaware or unwilling to claim them. The isolation doesn't come from being disliked. It comes from the overwhelming sense that you're always carrying more information than everyone around you. Conversations feel shallow. Social gatherings feel scripted. Relationships require constant translation between what is said and what is meant. And worst of all, you begin to feel guilty for understanding so much. You start to feel responsible for everything you notice, as though you must do something about it. But this is where the trouble begins. When you see clearly, you feel the urge to speak clearly. You want to name the elephant in the room, reveal the hidden tension, or tell someone what they're really feeling, but haven't admitted. But here lies the second danger. Truth, delivered before its time, becomes destructive. Socrates learned this painfully. He told the Athenians the truths they refused to see, that their wisdom was shallow, their certainty an illusion, their politics built on ego, and for this they condemned him. People say they want honesty, but what they really want is affirmation dressed as honesty. If you speak truth in its raw form, people interpret it as an attack. They feel exposed, cornered, invaded. When you point out what they aren't ready to face, you unintentionally trigger their defenses, and suddenly you become the enemy, not because you meant harm, but because your vision arrived before their readiness. This danger forces the intuitive person into a painful dilemma. Either remain silent and betray your clarity, or speak truth and risk damaging relationships. Socrates chose truth, and he paid the ultimate price. But you don't need to follow his path to its end. You must learn timing. You must learn restraint. You must learn that not every truth needs to be spoken aloud. Seeing clearly is a gift. Expecting others to see what you see is not. Here lies one of the harshest realities. When your perception is deep, some people will instinctively dislike you, not because you have harmed them, but because you can see them, truly see them. And that is terrifying for people who survive through masks. Socrates encountered this reaction constantly. Simply by asking questions, he revealed the gaps in people's reasoning. He exposed the cracks in their identity. And for many, this exposure felt like humiliation, even when no insult was intended. Highly intuitive people often experience the same reaction. Your presence alone can be unsettling, not because you are negative, but because you are perceptive. When someone relies on illusion to navigate life, they avoid those who can see through it. You may notice that certain people become defensive around you, or passive-aggressive, or inexplicably cold. This isn't because you've done something wrong. It's because you disrupt the story they are trying to maintain. You destabilize their comfort. And then, in some cases, projection begins. They place their insecurities onto you. They call you arrogant, or overly critical, or judgmental, despite the fact that you have said nothing of the sort. They fear your clarity more than your words, and so they distance themselves or attack you or spread stories to diminish you. Not because you are dangerous, but because your perception threatens the illusions they depend on. This is the most dangerous part of all. When you see too deeply into others, into their emotions, contradictions, wounds, and burdens, you risk absorbing everything you witness. You begin to carry their fear as if it were your own. Their sadness settles in your chest. Their anxiety becomes your tension. And suddenly, your inner world is filled with emotions that didn't originate in you. Socrates warned against this subtle trap. He believed that clarity must be anchored in self-knowledge. Otherwise, the mind becomes porous, vulnerable to the emotional storms of others. Highly perceptive people often struggle with emotional boundaries. They confuse understanding with responsibility. They see someone drowning in unspoken pain and feel compelled to rescue them, even when it's not their role. They sense dishonesty and feel the urge to correct it. They detect suffering and take it upon themselves to heal it. But this instinct leads to exhaustion, resentment, and eventually a loss of identity. You forget where you end and others begin. You become a mirror for everyone except yourself. Your gift becomes a burden, your sensitivity becomes a curse, and before long you are overwhelmed, depleted, and silently disappearing under the weight of what you perceive. Now we begin the transformation. Socrates believed that self-awareness requires both closeness and distance. You must see, but you must also remain separate. You must feel, but without becoming swallowed. This is the art of conscious distance, the ability to observe without absorbing, to witness without intervening. Conscious distance begins with recognizing that not every perception demands a response. You can sense tension in someone without needing to fix it. You can notice dishonesty without confronting it. You can see someone's pain without taking it into your body. You are allowed to understand without intervening. This is not indifference, it is wisdom. Socrates practiced this constantly. He saw the illusions people lived in, but he didn't force truth upon them. He asked questions and allowed them to reveal themselves at their own pace. To cultivate conscious distance, remind yourself, their emotion is not my responsibility. Their conflict is not my burden. Their illusion is not mine to shatter. You do not need to save others from their own journey. You need only remain honest with yourself. The next step is learning to protect your energy. Highly perceptive people often forget that sensitivity is a finite resource. You cannot constantly tune into the emotional frequency of others without draining your own inner reserves. Socrates created boundaries through dialogue. He controlled the direction of conversation. He asked questions rather than absorbing chaos. In doing so, he kept his inner life intact. You can protect your clarity by limiting how deeply you engage with the emotional worlds around you. Pause before responding. Observe your instinct to fix. Ask yourself, is this insight useful here, or is it simply mine to carry quietly? You retain your gift by guarding its edges. You maintain your vision by not overusing it. Remember, your ability to see clearly does not obligate you to act on every perception. That is how you stay whole. Ultimately, your journey is not to dim your perception, nor to convince the world to handle it better. Your task is to live peacefully with your own eyes open. Socrates lived this balance. He saw deeply, understood profoundly, yet walked through Athens with a certain calm acceptance. He knew that the world is not ready for full clarity. It never has been. But he also knew that clarity is a personal blessing, not a public weapon. Your role is not to wake the world. Your role is to stay awake yourself, without losing your peace. You are allowed to see beyond the surface and still choose silence. You are allowed to understand more than you reveal. You are allowed to carry wisdom without carrying the world. Your perception is not a punishment. It is a form of sight that requires maturity, restraint, and self-respect. If this message has spoken to something deep within you, then understand this. You are not alone, and you are not strange. You simply carry a level of perception that most people never learn to develop. And while the world may not always welcome your clarity, your life will become far more peaceful once you learn how to hold it, not as a burden, but as a quiet source of strength. So if this lecture resonated with your experience, give it a thumbs up. Not just for the algorithm, but as an affirmation to yourself that your way of seeing is valid. And if you want more content that helps you navigate life with wisdom, drawn from Socrates and other great thinkers, make sure you subscribe. There are many more insights coming, each one created to support you on this unusual path of awareness. And if you feel called, share your experience below. What is the hardest part about seeing what others don't? Your comment might be the message someone else needed to read today. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening with depth. And above all, thank you for having the courage to keep your eyes open in a world that often prefers shadows. I'll see you in the next video.